All right, hello all, and welcome to week 10 of 2100. I apologize for the delay in this PowerPoint. I've been trying to get all of the information I can into each week, and there's just so much. So again, my apologies, but hopefully you find this helpful. So let's get into it. So we'll start with course updates and reminders, then we'll do a review and recap. They'll both be videos, but they're videos, one about kind of wrapping up infant toddler social emotional development with specific strategies. And then because these understanding infant toddler development overall, and since we've covered all of the areas of development, I want to kind of follow up on early intervention and talk about referral and evaluation because those tie very well into infant toddler development across all areas. And then we must shift gears because it is time to talk about preschoolers. So now we're talking about 3 to 5-year-old physical growth and development. There's a lot about this. And honestly, we won't even get to all of it today, but we will cover these particular topics: gross motor play, fine motor and artistic development, motor development, and the brain maybe. Universal design for learning to support physically challenging conditions. We're not going to get to health of pre-K children, but I do want to talk about that a little bit. I will probably put a PowerPoint up next week. All right, so course updates and reminders. What do you need to know? Chapter 10 and 11 quiz was posted Tuesday. The discussion board was posted Tuesday. If you've not already seen those, please do. These obviously are going to be changed to today, but I knew I was going to be a little bit later this week. My apologies for the delay. This is a reminder for those of you who aren't aware, but in my classes, everything can be revised, everything, because we all need that work. People who are professional researchers are constantly revising their articles of studies they've conducted. Similarly, why shouldn't you be offered the same opportunities? So all assignments can be revised, all assignments can be submitted, and that means at any time for credit. But because I've had this happen where I've had too many assignments come too late for me to grade in a short amount of time, if you have late assignments, you need to get them to me by the 5th. That's really about quizzes and discussion boards. Complete those by the 5th because those are part of your grade. And then please start thinking about the preschool, infant toddler observations and the analysis of play. If you haven't already looked for both, there is a video version and instructions. Review that. We use Canopy. That is an okay alternative, but I will say that I really hope that as many of you can get into a classroom that have access. And then lastly, I graded the tests. One, please know your grades are not out of 100, they're out of 75. So if you see your scores in the 60s, you actually did fairly well. I had to add extra points to many tests because of questions 19 through 23 were supposed to be fill in the blank, but there were no instructions for you. I went to try and complete the test and I saw the issue. So many of you were awarded free points. If you answered those questions correctly, you were given extra credit. And also, you may revise the test, which means review my feedback, email message me when you are ready to take it again, and then I will clear your attempt to reopen the exam. I don't want to do that until you've looked at my feedback and reviewed your exam, because I have now learned how to ensure you see all feedback, including right and wrong answers on tests and quizzes. So please take time to review that because that will be extremely beneficial if you retake it. So yes, the test is out of 75 points. I just want everyone to be aware. All right, let's do a review and recap. And before we get to that, I do want to bring up another PowerPoint. I did not make a presentation on this because there was so much information, but this is what I didn't get to in infant toddler social emotional development. And similar, there are going to be topics I don't get to in physical growth and development. So what I really want you to do, if you haven't already, review this. I tried to put everything that I thought was important from this chapter in the book onto the slides. So we talk about autonomy, supporting autonomy. Yeah, it's not finished, but we're going to have to deal with the fact that I don't have time to make as much as I would like to. Temperament, types of temperament, secure attachment, early emotions, perception, and then so much more. So just take some time, and I have some videos covering a range of topics. So let's see what happens when we open that video. Probably open over here. Nope, not it. That's a different one. Wonder where it opened. Not there. All right. But anyways, just be aware that that is an option. That is something I want you to review because that has a lot of helpful information on infant toddler development. All right, let's do a quick review. Wrapping up infant toddler social emotional development. I just thought I'd put a quick video in here on kind of promoting social emotional skills for infants and toddlers.
Teaching social skills helps them become better adults. They are able to deal with problems in life if there are any. They have different strategies that they have learned on how to deal with situations and solve problems. Social emotional is very important when it comes to children and their learning.
It's given me a way to solve conflicts between.
So I'm going to say too, some of this is broad for all early childhood, but it's very helpful.
Two children that will end up in a.
By using the core strategies of the teaching pyramid, teachers are accomplishing great things in their classrooms. The first two levels give teachers a solid foundation by creating positive relationships and supportive environments for children.
So if you haven't heard of it before, this is all based on the pyramid model for social emotional development, which has been adopted by most early learning settings.
Then, teachers can begin to use strategies to help children develop skills they need to build friendships, solve problems, manage their emotions, and more. During this program, we'll focus on the third level of the teaching pyramid, social emotional teaching strategies. With these strategies in place, it does not take long to see some amazing results.
Ask her. I don't have the block. She's got the block. And you want to play with that block. What are you going to say to her?
Take turns.
Take turns. And then how do you ask her for the block?
Please.
Please? May I have the block? Very good. Can Miss LaShondra? All right. That's good. I like.
I'm frustrated because I should have been paying attention to the fact that this is not focused on infant toddler development, and that's really what I want. So what I might do is find another video to cover, to send to you all next, but I apologize because I thought this was specific to infant toddlers, but I must have just been looking at the fact that it was the pyramid model. However, the pyramid model is not wrong in that we do want to build positive relationships. So These are all true of children who are infants and toddlers as well. So
Stage 1 is the introduction of a skill. This is the show and tell phase and can be done in a variety of ways using a variety of tools like books, puppets, pictures, even an ant farm.
Ants always.
I would definitely say pictures are a great way to do this. Let's go to the next.
Once a skill has been introduced, the teacher moves to stage 2, building the child's fluency and confidence with the skill. Throughout the day, a teacher may use planned activities or situations to practice the skill, or use teachable moments during play and center activities, something as routine as getting water.
Whose turn is it? Your turn. Well, you know what we need to do, friends? Form a line.
Stage 3 helps children maintain the skill. Teachers learn to recognize when children are using a skill without being prompted. Then they can let them know you got it. This can happen at any moment during the day and is real evidence that a new skill is taking hold.
So make sure to find those motivators that help your student want to continue. So we'll see them.
Each time a new skill is introduced, teachers can follow this basic 3-stage approach. Introduce the skill using a variety of tools. Practice the skill through planned and unscripted activities. Maintain the skill by recognizing children for using the skill on their own. Now we're going to take a look at 3 classrooms and how each teacher used the 3-stage approach to build an important social-emotional.
I'm going to skip that. We're going to go to, these are very specific, but I'm going to skip just because of the fact that this is more preschool, but those are very clear strategies. Introduce, build fluency. So let's offer as many opportunities as possible to engage or to allow that child to use that skill, and then maintaining the skill by reinforcing mastery, or not even mastery, beginning mastery, let's say. So the child, for the first time, uses the skill independently. Okay, let's say, oh my goodness, look at you. You're taking turns without me having to help you. That's wonderful. Continue that process. All right, let's move on to the next
skill.
slide. So now that we have covered all of the areas of infant toddler development, which is language and literacy, social emotional, motor, fine and gross motor, and why do I feel like, no, I guess I put language and literacy together, cognitive, thank you, and cognitive skills. We want to figure out, well, what do we do with this information if we are concerned that an infant or toddler is behind? So here's, this is Minnesota, but there's a lot of, though states can implement early intervention differently in their states, there are specific pieces that are federally mandated that if states are accepting money to implement an early intervention program, then they have to follow these. And so they will review some of this, but also talk about referral and evaluation, which is where understanding when we have developmental concerns comes in.
Early identification of developmental delays is important for access to early intervention and early childhood special education. Development occurs rapidly in the first few years of life, and early identification of developmental delays allows us to take advantage of this rapid brain development. A wait-and-see approach is not recommended because detecting developmental delays early can reduce or eliminate the need for future services and supports. Parents, caregivers, and even professionals may have concerns about a child's developmental trajectory. There are a variety of resources available to help determine if a child's development is on track, including the Developmental Milestones Checklist from the Centers for Disease Control. Many of these resources can be found on Minnesota's Help Me Grow website.
But also these resources are available at the CDC. Regardless of how you may feel about the pandemic, they do have a lot of very helpful free resources for people who are concerned about their children's development.
When there are concerns about a child's development, anyone can make a referral for a free screening at helpmegrow.org. Referrals can be made for concerns in any area of development, and families can make referrals in a variety of languages.
And this is, although it's not the same website, this is true for early intervention in Rhode Island. So let's do, before we go to that, all right, so let's do early intervention in Rhode Island. So we're all on the same page. I guess I spelled it wrong. So here we go, early intervention. And then here, if you're curious about where to go, this is your list of EI providers. And August 1st is pretty recent. So here, you'll figure out, depending on where you live, who you can call about a screening. Similar to Minnesota, all of these agencies will offer a screening, or all of these agencies will screen children, typically through an ages and stages questionnaire, something that parents can fill out. And if there are still concerns, then an evaluation is typically held. But just for an example, say you live in Warwick, since Warwick is, you know, such a big place, you can call any places here, which are Family Services, Groden Center, Looking Upwards, Meeting Street, Seven Hills, or Trudeau Center. And actually, Trudeau Center is located right in Warwick, so that might be the most appropriate. And then here you have the contact information for every single provider listed. And what I love is that, where's Groden Center? That is one of my good friends. That is one of my good friends. I love the Groden Center Early Intervention Program because that's who I worked for. But this is an easy place that you can go to if you're looking for who can I call to find out, to start this process. And there are definitely, Meeting Street is huge. So not surprisingly, there are a lot of people who work for Meeting Street. Seven Hills is also large and has been in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, whereas most of these are specific to Rhode Island. Yes, Groden Center for sure too. So just so you know, this is what you do in Rhode Island, but it's very similar to if we were in Minnesota. All right, let's keep going. Oh, sorry.
Resources available to help determine Minnesota's Help Me can make a referral for a free screening at helpmegrow.org. Referrals can be made for concerns in any area of development, and families can make referrals in a variety of languages. CAPTA, the Child Abuse Protection and Treatment Act, requires referrals for children from birth to age 3 who have had a substantiated case of abuse or neglect. Referrals should always be made in collaboration with the family. Once a referral is made, a screening can take place to determine if there's a need for a full evaluation. When concerns are noted during a screening, a full developmental evaluation is conducted through a team approach, which includes professionals working alongside the parent or other guardians. The evaluation helps determine if the child is eligible for early intervention or early childhood special education services. Evaluations are free regardless of income level or immigration status.
And that's true of states. So though the cost of early intervention for families is dependent, and that's all services by the state, there are specific parts, for lack of a better word, that all states must provide free of charge, and one of them is evaluation.
Child is determined to be eligible for services, caregivers and providers will collaborate to develop an individualized family service plan for children birth to age 3.
And I'm going to say they're going to talk about how that's true for IEPs. It is much more true in early intervention, where typically it is the parent, providers, and even with the child in the home creating this plan.
Or an individualized education plan for children 3 years and older. The plan will indicate the services the child is eligible to receive. Except in cases of a court mandate, parents and other guardians have the right to accept or refuse services. If a family refuses services, or a child is not eligible for services, child welfare workers can collaborate with the family to seek out other services and supports that may be beneficial to them. Help Me Connect Minnesota offers a wealth of resources families may be interested in, including early.
So we'll stop there. But again, we looked at our own website for the state here, where we had information about EI referral and status. Here are Rhode Island early intervention procedural safeguards. So this is telling us what are, remember, if you haven't heard this, procedural safeguards are parents' rights in special education. These are parents' rights when it comes to early intervention. So here we have, this is very clear, native language or preferred communication, access to records. This is all very similar to the system in for IEPs in 3 years old and up. Due process and hearing. And then we have funding. Luckily, in Rhode Island, the state tries to cover all costs of early intervention. And it might do it by health. It will ask for your health insurance. And if you have health insurance, that's how costs will be covered. But if you don't, your child typically is covered by CHIPS, but even if not, there is no, that's not even an option. But even co-pays can be covered by the state or some other mechanism. So typically this is free of cost to the family. So here, if you do not have health insurance, your early intervention services can be covered by using federal and state funds. Again, but this is not your health insurance. This is specific to your child. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So now we have kind of a better idea on strategies to support social emotional development, though I'm going to find a better video to include in my supplemental PowerPoint for y'all. Let's get into the big topic of preschoolers and their physical health and development, because there's a lot. Let's start with gross motor. Remember, this is large muscle play. So when we talk about gross motor, we're talking about strength, typically, and stamina. So skills involving movement from one place to another. So here we have someone running. This person is just showing they're strong, but the types of skipping, jumping, running, all gross motor skills. These are the typical gross motor skills acquired during the preschool years. So children who are 3 years old typically are able to walk in a straighter line by 3. By 4, they're able to walk in a circular motion. But even more improvements happen at 4. By 4 years old, children start to alternate feet. So pay attention to this, because I started to really notice when children weren't, is that we typically will not alternate feet when we're still developing our balance. So it's as our balance is developing that we're able to alternate feet on stairs. And that's really the most appropriate way to climb stairs. Children also are able to hop, gallop, and leap by 4 years old. So lots of these skills of these gross motor skills are actually acquired during preschool. But a big reason for that, at least a reason, a way that children acquire these skills is through motor play. And it's typically very much It is guided by children's interests, not adults. It is so impactful on development, and it provides more motivation for learning motor skills and maybe not becoming fit, because I don't think that's as important as just enjoying and engaging in physical activity. Personally, I'm not sure that becoming fit should be the goal, more engaging in a healthy lifestyle. So things that develop during this time, and I'm going to rely some of my notes, and something that's really important is running. And running is actually something that is a fundamental ability that is promoted in play across all cultures, and something that we need to allow our children to do. Climbing. There's this thing called climbing competence, because we need to develop this large motor development, this ability to take risks, and have this positive disposition towards taking risks. Now, obviously, our young children are not going to be climbing mountains like this, but I can tell you from my own experience, one of my students who was probably advanced in gross motor development, who had autism, loved to climb and climbed everywhere he could in my classroom. He climbed on top of the printer, he climbed on top of the cubbies, he climbed on top of the counters. This kid could climb. And what I really wanted to do, and something I've suggested to other parents who have children who are climbers, is if you can afford it, either find a climbing gym that, because most allow very young children to climb and it gives them a healthy outlet, or find a space that has climbing equipment. Oftentimes playgrounds have them now. Then we have jumping and landing, which is really, both of those are complex actions. Landing is more challenging. It develops slowly but gradually during this time. And children become more confident in their ability to land as they get older, which means they're able to prepare for it. Catching and throwing. So this is something that develops slowly as well. If you've ever watched a child, go back to that, a child throw, it's a little bit easier, but they switch from different methods. It becomes more fluid. They have a much easier time knowing when to release the object. But what you also see happen is that children will, preschool children will catch with both hands and trap against their chest. That's what you start to notice in preschool years, and that also starts to develop in their ability to time that correctly. And what's very interesting about this is even in other cultures, so non-white American cultures, in lower resourced communities, children figure out a way without a ball. They find other things to throw and catch. I mean, think about, I grew up in New Hampshire, you all are in Rhode Island. Snowballs are something that we don't have to pay for when it snows. Crumpled up paper. There's a lot of different ways that people can practice throwing and catching. It's also kind of, hold on, I thought I was going to sneeze. I am. Also think about how a sport that became popular in urban communities where typically families are lower resourced is basketball. And the reason for that is because it is such an inexpensive sport to play. And so if you start and something to do, if you don't have anything else to do that's outside. And so if that's something you have access to, you're going to practice it a lot, especially if it doesn't really cost money or cost much. So just think about how catching and throwing, and so many of these motor skills can be developed across cultures, just using different materials. And then balancing is something that also changes, because as preschoolers get taller, their center of gravity changes, which improves their balance. And this is a perfect example of how US playgrounds, and this is, very, very clearly a stereotypical playground that I've seen in my area, have a lot of opportunities for children to practice these skills. But But there are other ways, right? We can improvise these skills. We can just put a straight line on a carpet and say, can you walk on that line on your tippy toes or something? So these are all skills developed in preschool years, and they're also developed most frequently when we offer our children forms of rough and tumble play. And this can be controversial to some. I know I had a very anxious mother who didn't like a lot of rough and tumble play. But the thing is, it does contribute to social competence. It does relieve tension. And contrary to popular belief, it does not lead to negative behaviors. So some forms of rough and tumble play include wrestling, play fighting, rolling around on the ground, and chasing. What's wonderful is that when we have nurturing adults around, it increases that social competence. Like I said, it does not lead to unruly behavior. Several research studies have confirmed that, where they've looked at rough and tumble play and found long-term outcomes do not suggest these children are more physically aggressive than others. And typically, these are the ideal situations where children actually develop these skills. I'm a big proponent of rough and tumble play with my own stepdaughters. They love to wrestle, so we wrestle a lot. They're tough. Thankfully, I'm pretty big, so I can take them, but it's a very important part of gross motor or motor development in general. All right, so that was a quick gross motor development section. Now we're going to get into something I like a little bit more, not because I am excited about fine motor development, but I am excited about artistic expression. So, oh, I forgot to fix this. Typically, as we've talked about with infants and toddlers, fine motor development involves those muscles or smaller muscles, but they're the muscles used for manipulating smaller objects. During preschool, I have to fix this slide. I thought I did and I didn't. Hold on. These things just bother me. If I don't make it look nicer than it's sad. I know. All right, back to it. So muscles used for manipulating objects. During preschool, children will typically master self-care skills. So think about self-care. Brushing your teeth, that requires small motor skills to manipulate a toothbrush. Buttoning your clothes. Tying shoes. These are all things, although tying shoes, I can tell you firsthand, is not as common for children today. But it is something that typically is practiced or acquired during preschool years. And what also happens is the acquisition of perceptual motor coordination, and that's the ability to integrate movements with things that you perceive through your senses, right? So here are some skills that children develop. I mean, there are a lot, but this is what happens during preschool. It's a big fine motor development phase. 1, they begin eating with a fork and a spoon. Again, that takes time. My brother still can't eat with a fork and a spoon. And well, he can't eat with a fork and a knife, that's for sure. Spreading food with a knife, so spreading some butter maybe. Putting on clothing and shoes. So they might not be able to tie the shoes. That is a more advanced skill, but they can put on things. Buttoning large buttons. So large buttons on a coat, they are starting to learn how to do. Finger paint, although finger paint has a variety of ways that could look. We definitely finger paint with younger children, but it's more handprints. Children now can make more distinct images with their fingers. Sculpting with clay. Cutting with scissors. We see that a lot in preschool. Manipulating smaller pieces of a puzzle. Grasping writing utensils. It's actually kind of a weird grip. And writing some letters of a name. If you haven't ever seen this, if you don't have readily available handwriting worksheets, which I don't like anyways, we do want to give children the opportunity to practice their names, and oftentimes using highlighter is wonderful. Create representational drawings. These are a little bit more advanced. We're going to get into artistic development in a second. and then coordinating arm movements with, and this is more about perceptual coordination, when we can coordinate hand and arm movements with vision, hearing, touch, and other sounds. I don't have a good picture for that, but it is something that happens. So let's talk about artistic development, because of course, if we're talking about fine motor, we're also talking about the development of drawing, painting, sculpting, other artistic expression. So first I want to talk about artistic expression just very briefly. It's typically a way that we allow children to express their emotions, or for us to understand their emotions when they don't yet have the words to do that. It's also a tool that's been used to understand trauma for young children. Again, they might not feel comfortable sharing it openly, but they might feel comfortable drawing something that they've experienced. And it's very important that we minimize the amount of guidance we give as adults. So, something to remember. Now, there are stages. Here, our younger preschoolers typically start with scribbling. I know I've seen a lot of this. It's so interesting. I was teaching when I was working in Coventry, I had two integrated classes, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. One was a 3 to 4 year old class. The other was my 4 to 5 year old class. And you can see the clear differences in development just between those age groups. And it's clear here where we don't have these we don't have many images that we can clearly see in this drawing, but now we've got some attempt to make images that look like something. That's pre-schematic. That's that next stage that we'd see in preschool, right? And then more advanced, beyond preschool, typically we see very clear images. Is it perfect? No, although this is still pretty good. We see an ocean, the ocean shelf, a sun, we see an ocean creature, definitely fish, beach, lifeguard stand, some really cool details actually in this picture. But you can see the progression from no images at all, an attempt to start making figures, and then truly creating a picture of something they've seen before. Now, when we talk about artistic development and we're talking about preschool, we cannot do that without talking about Reggio Emilia. If you have not heard about Reggio Emilia, which is an approach to teaching preschoolers, go to, I think, any lab preschool in a university. So if you've been to the URI lab preschool, they use the Reggio Emilia approach. When I was at the University of New Hampshire, we have our own child study center. And again, that was also a Reggio Emilia inspired preschool. And it's because it really embraces all of this research, even though it's been around for so long. So much of what we know about preschoolers and how they develop is fostered in a Reggio Emilia setting. But since I'm not the expert, I just love it. I want to show you a video on the Reggio Emilia approach. Again, you know I love these videos because they have illustrations, but this gives you a nice insight into this great way of setting up a classroom for preschool.
In response to the tragedy of World War II, people from the town Reggio Emilia developed a new model of education. War ought to never happen again. Led by Loris Malaguzzi, a teacher, their idea was to enhance a child's learning through real-life experiences instead of a fixed curriculum, so that each child develops a love for discovery, forms a personality of their own, and learns to respect others. Land, money, food, and skills for the first preschool were provided by the community. The Reggio Emilia approach is based on the philosophy of an image of a child. All children are viewed full of potential, with an innate sense of curiosity and endless imagination. They are creative, capable of constructing their own learning, and they have a natural interest to explore. While they follow their own interests, they also stay connected with others. Adults nurture their learning by providing a rich environment and support. Instead of a one-size-fits-all curriculum, Reggio Emilia uses a child-centered approach and project-based learning. Projects can emerge anytime, for example during play. Teachers can observe and create opportunities for new learning at a specific instance. For example, by opening up new environments, letting children raise thought-provoking questions, or by inviting others to collaborate. After an intervention, the children take control and progress independently until the project is finished and can be shared with others. Throughout a project, children naturally embody the spirit of researchers, risk-takers, designers, and explorers. They make hypotheses, try new things, investigate, play, and imagine. To progress, the explorers raise the questions, the researchers give feedback, and the designers demonstrate ideas and prototypes. Lastly, they all turn their theories into reality and construct experiments together. The learning becomes social, with endless ways to solve specific problems. To promote the development of creativity, teachers step aside and let mistakes happen. The conflicts that can follow nurture their social skills, because conflicts teach children to speak, to listen, to argue, and to discuss. Then learn to accept different opinions and to respect others for who they are. If two kids discuss a problem, a third can have an idea, and the entire group learns the value of teamwork. Teachers document projects through pictures, videos, or written observations. The learnings become visible in photographs, drawings, or sculptures.
This is an example of that. So every Reggio Emilia inspired preschool should have a wall that is like your documentation wall. And here is an example of one where you have real photographs, we have actual artwork, we have writing that is directly from the children as well as from the teachers that shows what's happening. I've always loved this is kind of a beautiful way of engaging in both formative and summative assessment. This could be the end of the project. It could have found its natural conclusion, and now the teacher has this summative assessment of everything the children did and learned. Or it is a way for you to formatively assess maybe more discrete skills, handwriting, things that instead of using some discrete assessment that is actually naturally embedded into your curriculum.
Ideas, quotes, and transcripts of conversations are put onto the walls. The children can later revisit their achievements, see projects that were left unfinished, and learn that failure is part of the path to progress. They build confidence in their own abilities. But teachers aren't instructors. Instead, they are companions in the child's own journey of discovery. They can introduce books, show new tools, or offer entirely new perspectives. However, they always remain mindful not to take over the constructive learning process, knowing that this limits a child's endless imagination and motivation. The children are fully in charge and develop a sense of ownership of their own progress, the foundation for a love for lifelong learning. Malaguzzi believed that there are 100 languages children can use to express themselves. They paint, sculpt, drum, whisper, and hark. They build, listen, speak, or sing and dance. And they play, which Einstein allegedly said is the highest form of research. Children learn from adults, other students, the environment, which is regarded as the third teacher. Rich in materials, the space is designed to spark curiosity, creation, and discovery. Ideally, there is an open kitchen and big windows, so the children can see what's happening outside, just like at an Italian town square, a piazza, where we can observe the lives of other members of our community. Parents are regarded as the last part of this education. To deepen their knowledge of a child-centered education, they are encouraged to learn from and with the teachers and children. So when the children come home after school, they can continue to be researchers, risk-takers, and explorers. Malaguzzi once said, "Stand aside for a while and leave room for learning. Observe carefully what children do, and then, if you have understood well, perhaps teaching will be different from before." Maybe one day our small researchers and explorers will grow into the big inventors and great explorers.
All right. So, oh, there's more. Hold on.
Millions of students from all around the globe have watched our Sprouts videos for better.
I was like, I didn't think there was more. So what I wanted to also explain is this picture. The video didn't mention it, but something that is two kind of components that are included, especially if it's an Italian based. So if it's actually the Reggio Emilia original school, but also places that are really trying to hold true to that approach. They will typically have an art studio or an atelier. Atelier. I'm not someone who can do, I don't have great Italian, but it's a huge place where students can engage, can find their own materials, choose their own activities, and create their own artwork. And you can see in this picture, look at all the paint, and it's accessible. Look at these found materials, it's accessible. And then we also have artwork posted. That's a little less Reggio Emilia inspired. I just like that this room is very much like an art studio, and it also has these large windows. It would be nicer if they were lower for all children to see, but this is kind of one example of that. And in a true one, there's an atelierista who is someone who has experience with artistic expression. It's probably someone who might have a background in studio art, for example. So that is Reggio Emilia. I will likely talk more about it next week. Yeah, I want to get into another topic, but I highly recommend looking into this approach. I love it. I've tried to do something like it in my own classrooms, but difficult when you only have 2.5 hours with students. But some of the things I started to do, more project-based learning, more students guided learning. For example, when I started to do project-based learning, our units were the automotive shop, the farm, the zoo. And for the automotive shop and the zoo, instead of me deciding, there were some things I had to do myself, which I disliked, but again, 2.5 hours isn't enough to set up an entire project in your room. I did have the children decide, okay, what materials do we need to make? And what are we going to name it? Which is a really cool thing to offer your students the opportunity to say, hey, we created this place together. It's your choice to name it. And that in itself became an activity because then everyone had an idea for a name. And then we had a voting activity where we learned the idea of we vote to decide as a collective what we want. Not everyone will be happy, but at least it's not my choice, it's the student choice. All right. So spend some time looking into Reggio Emilia. If you have a chance to visit the URI Child Study and Development Center, I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but they do have a lab that has children who are preschool aged, and they are Reggio Emilia inspired. I would recommend doing so. All right, next one.
Learning.
So I want to talk about, this is a bigger topic than I think I would have time to address, but we're going to talk about universal design for learning as it relates to supporting children who have physically challenging conditions. So I realize we might not have broached the topic, but universal design is creating environments that are accessible to everyone instead of adapting environments. So here, these are some of the conditions that we know will impact motor abilities. So cerebral palsy, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and spina bifida all are characterized typically by motor function delays. So CP typically is something that occurs during labor or childbirth. And it can present in many different ways, but more often than not, these children struggle with fine motor and eye-hand coordination. For example, one of my students who had cerebral palsy, she had a lot of weakness in her left side and never could handle, really manipulate objects with her left hand. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, not one I have experience with, but it is apparently one of the most severe disabilities in terms of impacting your motor abilities, and it's caused by genetic mutations. Typically, children have difficulty running, climbing upstairs, and will have a hard time getting up after they fall down. And lastly, spina bifida. I have not personally had a student with spina bifida, but in my school, I did. For 2 years, we had a child with spina bifida who was frequently in my classroom. And what we know is that it does lead to motor and sensory impairment. It can lead to bowel and bladder incontinence, so the inability to control your bowel and bladder functions. And sometimes cognitive impairment. I can tell you with the child I worked with, there was no cognitive impairment. This child was hilarious. I really liked her. But many of these children and this particular child are confined to a wheelchair, and she had a really cool motorized wheelchair. On the flip side, there are conditions that can lead to motor function challenges. Autism, the book talks about autism. Really, it's about motor planning, the ability to engage in actions that require multiple motor abilities. That can be very difficult for our children with autism. Whereas children with Down syndrome are actually physically affected in that they typically have low muscle tone, and that low muscle tone can make it difficult for them to do certain things like, for example, one of my students had a more difficult time crisscross applesauce on the rug. So let's not have them sit on the rug, right? The core strength is probably the most difficult. They have and again, this is because of low muscle tone, their core strength is lacking compared to their peers. And then one of my students, he had a very difficult time traveling up and down stairs. So these are some conditions that we found can impact or are kind of characterized by motor function delays or challenges. What do we do though? We can't just say, hey, take care of yourself. So these are some very concrete strategies for setting up a classroom for these children. And I've had this experience because my child with CP did have a pretty large wheelchair, and she also had a walker, and that was the most important because she really needed that practice walking on her feet. But it also requires that we have space. So you have to think about, where are things in your classroom? Are there places where your children can freely move around? Some teachers set up their classroom environment to prevent challenging behaviors, but that can also restrict access for your children who are impaired through, who have mobility impairments. So you want to make spaces open, and you want to make sure peers are aware that they're keeping floors clean, because a walker or a wheelchair will get stuck on a small toy that has been left. So things to keep in mind. Positioning, so making sure that you are positioning a child that they have the strength to control what they're doing. Like I said, a child with Down syndrome typically is lacking in core strength. So let's set up a situation where their core strength isn't part of the problem with them completing a task. So that means supportive seating. Did I put there should be a slant board there, but maybe it's on the next slide. This one, I have a slant board on a later slide, but that would also work. Adapting equipment. So this is more creating equipment that gives children access to everything. I had to do this in one of my classes where I defined a table that was small enough for my student with CP because she was very tiny, that all the tables were much too high for her. So we had to figure out, where can we put this child? But you also want it to be accessible to all children. So I like this picture where there is equipment that not only can this child who has a mobility impairment access, but other children can too if they want to exercise their arm muscles. Providing larger materials. So I love this picture of these large linking beads, because we have children who are having a hard time developing that fine motor of grasping. So we need to give them more opportunities to grasp objects that they can successfully grasp, and then kind of move from there to smaller. So these Unifix cubes are usually tinier, right? They're usually about an inch, 1 inch by 1 inch in area. Whereas this one is about the size of her hand, which makes it much more easy to manipulate. These are my favorites. So adapting fine motor activities. Now, this, again, adaptations are more retrofitting. These are things where you should have them in your classroom already for it to be true universal design for learning. And I did. So I love these scissors because then it's just about squeezing. They retract on their own. The child is just learning about the squeezing motion. Here we have a special pencil grip that helps the child put their fingers in the position to hold the pencil correctly. And then these, this slant board is so helpful for children who tend to slouch. And when you slouch, it's hard to kind of see what you're doing. So then it helps keep them upright. And then we definitely need materials that exercise these muscles. So clay, again, Reggio Emilia does it right. So squeeze toys, clay, or other modeling materials. I always love dressing boards, but as opposed to buying something, you can always find something in your home and create it. I love that. And then pot beads are also one of my favorite material to use when I'm working with children who have a fine motor delay, who need to develop that small muscle strength. And then this is obvious, but making sure that your children have access to powered mobility devices. And I say this because typically families don't know that they can that insurance can cover these things because it impacts their ability to engage fully in the educational system or access general education curriculum, but it can. And so as a teacher, you might want to involve tech access in your planning if you are a special education teacher, early childhood special ed, because they are the ones who will assess and determine whether a child, a student who has a mobility impairment, is eligible for something like this. And I think when we're talking about trying to create an accessible classroom, and this is where I'm really thinking about play with peers, shouldn't we offer them devices where they can access without having to rely on an adult? Now, that is why my student had her walker, because that was the way that she was able to access activity. She had the ability to stand on her feet. She just didn't have enough strength and balance to do so without the walker. But there are many children who can't. And so in those instances, we have to think about, let's find mobility devices that allow them to engage. All right. Okay, this is where I'm going to end because it's already been a while. So with that, take time to complete your exit ticket. I'm going to do a supplemental PowerPoint and I'll show you what we're going to talk about. Sorry, I just realized I'm not on share, but share screen. So we're going to talk about next development across cultures. That'll be kind of your supplemental information as well as the health. So there are some specific health considerations when we're thinking about preschoolers that can drastically impact their development, and I'll put those in some slides for you to access tomorrow. But that's all I have. Please do not forget to complete your exit ticket. Thank you.